Welcome back. This is week 15. We're covering language arts today. You can print this off of www.hilarioushomeschooling.com. We are on week 15 of 6-month countdown, ready to homeschool. Language arts, we've talked about reading a few weeks ago. So this is going to be the other side of the coin. This is expressive language. This is when you are giving output. So on our little chart that I had for reading, I use the same exact chart here just to remind you that reading was a receptive skill along with listening. But language arts is going to be both speaking and writing. It's when we're expressing language, either writing with our hands or speaking with our mouth or communicated in some way. Our verse for today is John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I was puzzled as a little girl when I heard this term for Jesus. Jesus is the Word that they're referring to in this verse. And it didn't really make sense to me. Why wouldn't you just say Jesus was there and Jesus was creating? As I got to thinking about it more and more, I really liked this expression. In the beginning was the Word. This is what God wanted to communicate to us. God wanted to communicate so much that he and Jesus came up with this plan for Jesus to come to earth and translate God's love to us. So in some ways, Jesus is the ultimate expression of God and what we can understand God to be. If we think about that, we think about how much God wanted to communicate with us. And if we are made in the image of God, which I firmly believe we are, then we also have a desire to communicate with other people. So expressive language, learning to communicate clearly and effectively with other people, is something that God created us to do. Now remember, last time we talked about listening and speaking. The oral part of the language is a natural God-given ability for all humans, unless there is some disability that's preventing it. But reading the phonetic code and writing the phonetic code is not a natural God-given ability. It is something that must be explicitly taught and something that needs patient, tender kindness. It is especially important that you be tender and kind, because when somebody is expressing something, it's not going to be right the first time. Rarely is it right the first time. It's often something that people are hesitant to do because expressing something makes them vulnerable. It's putting themselves out there open to criticism, and they're taking their first tentative steps on trying something new. When babies learn to talk, we don't criticize. I mean, sometimes we laugh at them because what they say is cute and funny, but for the most part, we're not critical. We're encouraging. We want them to keep on speaking. We encourage them to keep making sounds and keep working toward forming words. I wish we could give that same grace to, 9-year-old boys who this is a really big step for them, is trying to write a new story or trying to put something that's in their mind down on paper. And we can be very harsh and very criticizing and very condemning and make them not want to repeat that experience again. So I would encourage you to think carefully about what you're going to say to your kids as they start taking these steps into expressing themselves with language arts. All right. On the handout, I have given you a list of everything that I think falls under language arts. There's probably more. This is a huge list, and it doesn't make it onto everybody's curriculum calendar. There's so many things that we think kids have to learn that we start with many things too early, I think. I'm not really sure that it does a whole lot of good to try to get a 7-year-old to learn the difference between a noun and a verb, especially when some words could be both a noun and a verb depending on how it's used in the sentence. The word light, for example, has so many different possible meanings, and some of those meanings are adjectives or adverbs or nouns or verbs. It makes it really difficult to teach parts of speech when there's so many nuances and not even the experts agree. So I think that sometimes we need to look at all the different ways that your child is learning language arts and not be in such a hurry to try to cram the things that are for the upper grades into the lower grades. Sorry, I've got a little fruit flying here today. Okay, so I'm just going to read them real quick and then talk about what the stages are. And then I've got quite a few curriculum to show you, so I'll tell you when it's a good time to take a break, because again, this is going to be a long one. All right, language arts can encompass handwriting or typing or both, spelling words correctly, learning vocabulary, new words in any of your content areas. Right now I'm teaching my kids biology, and there's several new vocabulary words every day. Root words are very helpful here, Latin and Greek. There's quite a few words that our English language borrows from Latin and Greek root words. Also prefixes and suffixes. That whole study is called morphology. I didn't write that down, but you can add it there if you want to look up and get some more information on morphology. Capitalization and punctuation, grammar, including parts of speech, verb tenses, that kind of thing. Diagramming sentences. Do you have good memories of that? Learning to write a sentence, learning to write paragraphs, learning to write papers. Organization and logic. Your thinking skills are on display in your writing. How well you can think your way through and reason your way through, like an argument, for example, and then put it down on paper. Making speeches in public, or acting out a play or presenting poetry. Outlining, finding the main idea of different paragraphs and putting them down. Just basic conversation, having a conversation, or, even just learning how to meet somebody new and talk about the weather or whatever. That's a language arts skill. Also, other ways of informally communicating with others, like letters, emails, texts. Just thinking about what we have in our society today as ways that we communicate that weren't even around 30 years ago. Those can all be thought of as language arts. Research, how to do research and find facts from other people who would be considered experts, and how to avoid plagiarism. It's very tempting when you've got a whole thing already written out over here just to copy it word for word and call it yours, but why that's wrong and why we avoid it in academic situations. Different styles of citation. Right now I'm helping my son write a paper using MLA. There's also APA and Chicago, I think. Depending on how far up you go in academic circles, different disciplines prefer different types of styles of citation. The different writing styles: persuasive, narrative, expository, and descriptive. Persuasive is when you're trying to change somebody's mind about something. Narrative is when you're just telling a story from beginning to end. Expository, that is when you're like giving, like teaching. And descriptive is when you're trying to paint a picture with words. Editing, proofreading, revising, these all fall under language arts. And also using visual aids and charts that will help people understand what you're trying to get across more clearly. And this can include presentation boards like you remember doing for science fair. A smaller version of that now is called lap books, and they're basically just file folders that you make into a trifold and put little things on, so that you're not necessarily writing a report, but you're still giving some facts and some pictures or something that you learned. And also how to do PowerPoint, or more commonly now is Google Slides. Learning how to just put together a simple slideshow that can go along with a speech that you're preparing. Okay, those are all things that you can do for language arts. And here's the kicker. I would not do all of these every year. I think that because there's so much to do, it is important for you to pick and choose based on what year you're doing, or how crazy your household is, or what you're going to focus on that year, that you just choose a few of these. I mean, it's not wrong to do several, but it's when you spread yourself too thin, especially if you're still trying to teach reading, math, social studies, science, art, music, and be involved in church activities, you're going to find that trying to cover all of these language arts skills in one year is probably going to be too much. So there are some years that we completely skipped spelling. We didn't do spelling at all because we were focused more heavily on, say, handwriting. We've done handwriting almost every year because it's something the kids can do all by themselves, but I'll get to that a little bit. So don't necessarily feel like you have to cover all of this every year. I'm just trying to give you examples of all the different things that count for language arts. All right, different stages here at the bottom. The preschool years are good for developing writing and drawing habits. There's little, I didn't bring one down, but there's little things that you can put on the pencil for them, a special grip that will help them learn how to hold a pencil correctly. And it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal when they're little, but this is when their habits are forming for the rest of their life. And there are efficient, effective ways to hold a pencil. So I'm sure you can YouTube that and find all the different people out there who believe in that and can tell you why. It still hasn't been that big of a deal in our family, but I would encourage you to pay attention to how they're holding a pencil in their preschool years because it will make a difference later in life. So learning to write their name, encouraging them to draw pictures, and then listen when they tell you about their stories and their drawings. If they had a dream, listen to their whole entire dream. If they want to tell you the plot of their favorite movie, listen. This is them doing their expressive language, and they have so much to share and so many ideas. They aren't going to write all of that down for you, and they don't need to. They're preschoolers. But this is when they are learning how to tell back something that's in their brain. So listen when they're talking to you and have conversations with them on a regular basis. Also, model correct grammar in your own speech. I had a college professor who grew up in the deep South, some backwoods in Arkansas somewhere, and she was teaching us honors English. And I remember her telling us what a struggle it was for her to unlearn the speech patterns of her youth and relearn academic English so that she could be a professor. And it never dawned on me that this is a struggle that some people have. I was raised by my mom, who had been raised by a Latin teacher and a high school principal. So like in our family, it didn't ever really occur to me that there would be people who have different accents or slang words as part of their vocabulary, that this would be something they would have to unlearn. But you will do your preschooler a world of good if you will avoid double negatives in your own speech. Just pay attention to how you speak around the house and when you're having a conversation with them, because they pick up on all of it. They're modeling their speech after your speech. Okay, early elementary years. And really, the timetables that I'm giving you here, you're really going to have to judge for yourself. Some girls are ready to write 5-page stories at age 4. But some boys, and I don't want to pick on the boys all the time, but it is more characteristic of boys to develop later with their language art skills. So some boys, at age 11 are just finally ready to pay attention to writing a sentence. So you are just going to have to use your judgment as a parent to how mature your child is and where they're at in these different stages to know what to emphasize. This should not be, well, Rachel said to do it this way. No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to look at your child and what they need and where their stage of development is already. Okay, so handwriting, this is when you really want to start focusing on uppercase and lowercase of every letter and making that an automatic skill so that that doesn't slow them down when they want to write a sentence. And you can start with cursive, you can start with print and then go to cursive. You can skip cursive forever. It's your choice. There's pros and cons for all of that. You can look that up. Allow them to dictate their stories or their answers. At this point in their development, they are still struggling sometimes to write just each letter. So if you tell them that you want them to write 5 sentences by supper time on, the Revolutionary War, well, there's a whole bunch of different subskills in there that they're having to do. I mean, first of all, they have to think of 5 things about the Revolutionary War, and then they have to put them in a certain order. Then they have to make each one into a sentence, and then they have to spell every word correctly and add capital letters and punctuation and fit it all on a page with margins while trying to remember how to hold their pencil. Like, that is so many skills for a young, immature writer. It is okay for you as a parent to say, hey, we just finished that book on the Revolutionary War. Can you just tell me 5 things that you remember? And then look them in the eye and listen as they count out 5 things, or actually go to the computer and type it for them and then print it out and have them put it in a notebook or a file. That those are their words that they remembered about the Revolutionary War, but it's not going to take them all afternoon to do the assignment because you recognize that what you really wanted from them is the 5 facts about the Revolutionary War. You didn't need an entire paper written out by them that was going to take all of those subskills that I listed before. So think through what you're really after with your kids and how you can lessen a little bit of the busy work for them at this stage. Also, that goes for the same in workbooks. If you're doing a workbook and the workbook is saying, write a complete sentence for all of these questions, and there's 10 to 15 questions, well, that's enough for some kids to just give up and hang their head and cry for hours. So to avoid that kind of behavior, it is okay for you as a parent to say, why don't you write answers for number 3, 5, and 10, and then you can just tell me the answers to the rest of those. And that way you're honoring your child's maturity level and still saying, okay, this assignment still matters to me, but you don't have to spend all of your time with a skill that you struggle with. I just want to hear what you have to say about it. Okay, copy work is helpful at this stage. Copy work is when somebody else has already written the sentence, they have already spelled all the words correctly, they have already put commas and quotation marks and all those things in where they're supposed to be, and your child is simply transferring that to their own paper as a way of practicing their handwriting and as a way of noticing that capital letters are important, quotation marks are important, periods are important, exclamation points go here. That's the kind of thing that they're noticing in copy work, but you're not necessarily asking them to do all the thinking part and the spelling part as well. The spelling and the grammar are just modeled for them already. So copy work isn't a bad thing, but again, think about how much time you want them to be spending of their childhood on copying somebody else's work. And then just let them turn their stories into plays. Encourage them to improvise and come up with fun ways of doing different things. Sometimes my kids loved getting out little paper bags and doing puppet shows. And if you've just finished like a story like Hansel and Gretel, it can be fun to color your own popsicle puppets and put on a little play for grandma and grandpa when they come over for supper later that week. So just think about ways that you can turn reading lessons into speaking assignments where they're still presenting something and still expressing their language, but it's not necessarily a writing assignment. All right. Later elementary and middle school years. This is where you start to get them used to finding facts and data and outlining what other people have written. So Institute for Excellence in Writing, and I'm going to talk about them in a little bit, they do a great job of teaching keyword outlines. And that is something that you can learn from Andrew Pudea. He does a great job of helping kids understand what are the key words in this sentence, and can I just write those 3 words down? You also want to be focusing more on spelling at this stage. Some of my kids had a hard time with spelling, and they actually improved with their spelling when they started typing into a computer, and the computer would do the little squiggly lines under all the words that were misspelled. That was when they started to pay attention. Even though we'd done spelling for years and years and years by that point, that was when they finally were like, oh, I keep misspelling that word. I need to learn the right way to write it. So I'm not going to say that spelling is ever going to be easy for some of your kids. Some kids just pick it up easily, and they read all the time, so they know how the word's supposed to look, and they just can do it from memory. Some kids just struggle with it all of their life. So you have to decide how important spelling is in your family, but do teach the basics. Vocabulary with root words and prefixes and suffixes. This is where kids start to unlock the meaning of words by knowing that this root word means this, and the prefix re means again, so this word now means do this again. Beginning grammar, usage, and more advanced sentence and paragraph structure. Depending on how advanced your kids are already, you should be aiming for a paragraph easily, that they can write a paragraph by the end of their 8th grade year. Some kids will be ready to write even more. Some girls have written creative writing stories that are, 20 pages long on a monthly basis. And some kids actually have to be tempered back. Like they don't know how to organize their thoughts into a concise statement. Their gift is just prolific writing, tons and tons and tons of words. So make sure and praise your kids who are able to say things concisely as well, because that is also a gift. They should have experience with all 4 writing styles during the middle school years, and there should also be an emphasis on creative writing now and then, including poetry. Don't ignore poetry. Some kids who don't do well at tons and tons of paragraph writing may actually be really good at poetry. And you wouldn't know that if you didn't ever give them a chance to write a poem. So encourage both. Okay, when we get to the high school and college years, that is when we really hit the formal grammar hard. That is when they need to learn how to diagram sentences, especially if they're going to go on and learn a second language. I remember trying to teach my daughter French, and they were hitting the chapter on indirect objects, and I hadn't taught her indirect objects in English. So the whole concept was completely different, and especially because there's a different order in French for your indirect objects than there is in English. And so it was throwing her for a loop because she couldn't understand the concept because I hadn't taught it explicitly in English yet. So I learned my lesson. Definitely do some English grammar before the really in-depth English grammar before you learn a second language if possible. This is also when they need to learn how to write longer writing assignments, do research, avoid plagiarism, add citations to their work to prove that they found it somewhere, an expert said it somewhere. And typing would be a really helpful skill, especially before their high school years if they think they're going to be going on to college. So there are typing programs out there on the computer. I forgot to mention one in my notes that I wanted to talk about, TTRS, Teach Typing, Read and Spelling, or something like that. I'll try to add it to the notes before I put them on the online for you. Okay, if this is getting really long for you and you need to take a break, go ahead, because the next section of this video is going to be reviewing several language arts curriculums that you might want to use in your home. Okay, so let's hit it hard. Barton Reading is something I talked about back when we did our reading one. Barton Reading, it's the same exact program, but Barton Reading teaches spelling. It teaches vocabulary, root words, prefixes, suffixes, and all of those things are really helpful with vocabulary development. If kids are struggling with language already, with language reading and expressive language, then this is a great program to keep on using. A reason for handwriting. This is one of the ones that we used quite a bit. They start off very simple for the week. There's usually 5 lessons in a week, and every week features a different Bible verse that's already printed, ready to copy, and they spend the week getting ready to write it. So like the letter K, the word kind, the word enjoyable, the word words, they work on it throughout the week, and then when Friday comes, they're ready to write this whole verse, and they're encouraged to write it on these special pages that are at the back that look like, little posters, mini posters that they can then tear out and color and then either hang in their room, or we used to save these up, and then when we visited the nursing home, we would hand them out, and the residents just thought that was the best, and it was a way for our kids to meet different people in the nursing home. Another great handwriting series is called Pen Time. These are not very expensive at all. Grade 4 I especially liked because it was focusing on every state in the United States. And so I specifically, even when my kids weren't in grade 4, I specifically got this workbook for them when we were studying the United States, because every day then, or maybe every 2 days, I don't remember how much I assigned every day, but they would get ready to write certain words, and then they would write a whole paragraph about each individual state. And I just really thought that this was a good way to learn a few facts about the geography of America. I also had this one on hand that my daughter has already done. This is Pen Time grade 7. And so you can tell that it is more advanced. There's more writing. It's smaller lines. And so this one seems to be, this one I really did like. They had some great poems that they would spend some time on. And again, it's kind of like a poster sheet that you can then color and tear out, which we didn't do in that case. But this one looks like poems and different kind of animals like muskrats and weasels that they're just learning some facts about each week. So depending on what you're studying and how advanced your kids' handwriting skills are, those can be fun. You can also simply just buy handwriting tablets like this. And if you don't want to do a formal handwriting series, you can just write a sentence about what you're learning each week and then have your kids copy it. There's programs on the computer that can do that for you for free too. All right, Spelling Power. This is a huge book, but it can last you your entire K through 12. Actually, they don't recommend Spelling Power in kindergarten. More like second grade through 12. It is for every kid in your home, all at the same time. What they recommend doing is after you take the placement test and you know where your kids are, you just put a paper clip on the list that your kids are working on that week. You spend 15 minutes dictating a word. If they know it, they don't ever have to study it again. If they don't know it, then they record it in their special student record book. Each week or each day has a different page. If they miss 3 or 4 words, you write them here, and then they practice them. And then there's a whole routine for practicing them again on the back and writing sentences. So I liked doing Spelling Power the years that we did spelling because I could do the same book for all of the kids that were doing spelling. I did fall asleep giving spelling tests. If I had to sit still long enough to give a spelling test, that was probably about 15 minutes. And if you sit down for 15 minutes and you're that tired, you'll fall asleep. So spelling sometimes just didn't happen at our house. Okay, this one is called English from the Roots Up. I really liked this series. We didn't use it as much as I wanted because it really freaked one of my girls out. I don't know, she just had an aversion to it immediately, and that was too bad because I think she would have learned a lot. Basically what they do is all the Latin words are given a red outline, and all the Greek words, see if I can find you a Greek word. All the Greek words are given a green outline. And you go through in order. There's 100 words. You learn the root word because it's green, you know it's Greek. And then you learn what it means. And then you learn all the different words that have this in it. So phonograph, telephone, phonogram, euphony, symphony, megaphone, microphone. These all have the same root word. And so your vocabulary is just growing by leaps and bounds as you go through the book because you start to realize how many of our words are built with Latin and Greek root words. So this one is corpus or corporus, and it stands for body. And it's got core, incorporate, corporation, corpse, corpulence, corpus, corpuscle. If you really stuck with it and did all 100 cards, it would be amazing. And there's a volume 2. So that's more than you ever needed to know. I really liked studying Latin and Greek, especially when we were doing ancient Greece and ancient Rome, so that they could see how our English language has been impacted. We didn't ever spend the entire year using it, but it was fun to do it for a few weeks and just help build up their vocabulary that way. Okay, next page. Learning language arts through literature. We talked about this one when we did the reading one because it's based on literature, but the different activities each week can be spelling. They can be grammar guides, like adding ER to a word. There's some handwriting every week. There's a spelling test that goes with every week. Quotation marks, capitalization. This one is for the 3rd grade. It's yellow. 3rd grade skills are yellow. And every grade has a different color and a different set of books that go with it. So learning language arts through literature is a way to do a whole bunch of language arts all in one book. But remember, it's not everything. Okay, this one's called Easy Grammar. I really, really like the way she teaches grammar because she starts out talking about the list of prepositions, and the kids are supposed to memorize the list of prepositions right away. And to do that, she's got bingo games and all that kind of stuff. When a kid can recognize a preposition, they can recognize a prepositional phrase. If they can recognize a prepositional phrase, they can cross it off at the beginning. So, for example, the hotel maid has cleaned all of the rooms. Of is a preposition. You're crossing off of the rooms. That's not going to have your subject or your verb in it. You're going to go back to the beginning and find out that subject is made, has cleaned is your verb phrase. This is 6th grade easy grammar, so it's a little bit more advanced. You could start with this one, but this is how she basically teaches it, is start with crossing out prepositional phrases, then find the main verb, find the main noun, and underline them. And she uses the same system throughout all of her books. So whenever you start to use the grammar whenever you think your kids need to start grammar, I would highly recommend whatever grade they're in, just doing the easy grammar for that grade. She also has something that's for older kids, daily teaching lessons, which is more of a review. And so for this one, like they do a sentence fixing the capitalization, a sentence fixing the punctuation. Then she's got a little bit of teaching on 2 different topics. This one happens to be clauses, subjects, and verbs. And then the last exercise on every page is combining sentences, learning how to put 1 or like 3 small sentences into a big sentence using the skills that they've learned all along about clauses, dependent clauses, independent clauses, all that kind of thing. If you're finding that your grammar is not up to teaching them grammar, you will probably want to learn right along with them. Maybe even get yourself your own book so that you can refresh all the grammar concepts as you're teaching them. All right, this is the one we used for high school, seniors in high school. It's called Analytical Grammar. This is the teacher book. I didn't get down one of the student books, but I just wanted to show you that this is the serious stuff. She teaches in her videos how to diagram sentences, all the sentences, all the complicated sentences. And when you diagram them, you also know then if it's a noun, a verb, an adjective, all that kind of stuff. Again, there were times that I had to watch the videos along with my kids to remember how to help them on their homework. So if your grammar is rusty, just buy yourself your own workbook and keep working along with the kids. This is an old classic that I love. If you're trying to teach kids to write, you've got to have this book. I don't think I ever read the whole entire thing, but there were so many ideas in here that, you know, sometimes the book report or the report or the report or the report, they're so overdone. There's so many other things that you can write academically. You do not have to assign reports all the time. So think about other ways that you can have your kids expressing language. And this book is super helpful with all the ideas. Definitely has the, 70s feel to it, educational materials, but a lot of fun to read. And you don't have to read the whole book. You just have to get a couple ideas here and there and then just keep going. This series is called Language Lessons for, and then she has, different ages. So this is the language lessons for a secondary child, but she also has for little ones, for elementary children, that kind of thing. This is 180 lessons divided up by days, so that it has 180 days of work to do. And they are not long, they are short. The kids get to actually write right in the book, so there's not a lot of copying. It's pretty efficient, but I will say you will probably not master the language arts skills using this book. You will be introduced to them and you will have good discussions about language arts skills, but for the most part, you will be exposed to good poetry. And then the really fun thing about these books is that they always include full color pictures to get the kids thinking. And this is supposed to spark their creative writing. So like on day 1, they're looking at this picture and they're answering these questions. And then the next day, they get to make up their own story. So this has a mix of creative writing, a mix of poetry, a mix of different kinds of writing. And it covers capitalization, punctuation, semicolons, conjunctions, parts of speech. So I used these books quite a bit, especially those years that were super crazy, because my kids could do them almost independently and it didn't take very long. Sometimes that's what you have to do in order to get through school with 6 kids. All right. Last paper, Draw Right Now. These come, there's 8 of them total, and you can buy them in a box set. You can also buy them individually. Love this series for little kids because she goes through and shows you step by step how to draw a picture, how to draw a figure or a picture, and then shows you how you could make it into a actual beautiful drawing, and then gives you words that you could do that go with that picture. So this is supposed to be about the Southwest. This book actually has the United States from sea to sea and moving forward. So this would be a great addition to your history studies, your American history studies in the early grades. I don't necessarily recommend this for high schoolers because they're kind of over it by then. But it's really fun for your younger kids to learn how to draw a picture and write the words. If they don't like the words that go with it, you can provide other words, or you can encourage them to write their own stories. We have used this for the Statue of Liberty, just learning how to draw all sorts of things. There it is. I love doing this one. We have a whole 2-week study that we do on the Statue of Liberty, and I always include this because it's fun to be able to draw your own picture of the Statue of Liberty and add your own background. So I highly recommend this entire series. I have put a link there on there that would benefit me as an Amazon associate if you decide to buy it. Feel free. The next one I put down, Miller Pads and Paper. I don't have anything from them, but I really appreciated the company and the people behind the company. They still put out blank books that you can buy. They're just blank books. They're like composition notebooks, but sometimes they're just blank paper, and your kid can write and draw. Sometimes if you're doing Draw Right Now, you want a book that has like this at the top and these lines at the bottom, and they sell a book like that you could buy to go along with this. They also just sell ones that you could just, use as a nature notebook, or your kid could just draw whatever they want, like a sketchbook. So check out their company because I really liked it. They also have a blank comic book. If you have a struggling writer that's not really wanting to look at a blank page, sometimes looking at frames of comic books, especially if they have read graphic novels or comics themselves, they might be enticed into drawing their own comic of something that you've been studying in school, or just out of their own imagination. So I really appreciate Miller Pads and Paper. The next one is Institute for Excellence in Writing. This is the top of the line company. They charge a lot of money. Back when I was starting homeschool, all he had to offer was a 12-hour seminar on DVDs that would teach parents and teachers how to teach kids to write. So I remember trying to watch that one summer and falling asleep. That's a common theme. If I sit down for more than 15 minutes, I fall asleep. So Andrew Padilla did a great job of helping parents and teachers figure out his models for teaching writing, and they're very successful. But eventually they realized that parents and teachers want more than just teaching them how to write. They want Andrew Padilla to teach their own kids. So he came out with all these other seminars that you can now get DVDs for or streaming online. And he actually gives the video instruction to your kids. We used one of his series, I think it was level B, for our girls when they were in middle school this last 2 years ago maybe. And he would give an hour-long instruction 1 day a week, and then they would have their homework assignment to work on for the rest of the week. I did not pay enough money to have them grade it. You can do that. You can actually have them enrolled in a class where they turn their work into a teacher who grades it. They still turned their work into me. But having Andrew Padilla explain the concepts directly to them instead of having him explain them to me and me teach them was very helpful. So I just want you to know that it's out there. I want you to know that if you are going to use his materials, you really need to spend some time yourself understanding his philosophy. It's really good. But if you don't understand how he's teaching it, you're not going to be equipped to handle teaching your kids his models. So take some time to do your homework if you're going to use any of his materials. Okay, last one on the list is Dinah Zeik. This is the name to follow if you're into graphic organizers and foldables. Okay, so graphic organizers aren't new. It's something that we've had around for years and years. It's just making a chart to try to get your ideas down on paper before you start. But Dinah Zeik has done a great job of coming up with fun little ways to make booklets that help you organize your thoughts on different things. So if your kids are really into arts and crafts and cutting and pasting and construction paper and folding, they would love doing some Dinah Zeik's foldables and graphic organizers. Some kids just really hate all that stuff. They just want to get their homework done and get back to whatever they were doing. So this would be busy work to them, and they might not enjoy it as much. So only you know which kind of kid you have. But this book that I've got here is called The Big Book of Books and Activities. But she has a whole website with other foldables, and a publishing company, one of the textbook companies, got a hold of her stuff and started making it for their publishing company as well. So there's even more online now that features her stuff. But like this one is a little booklet that you can make that has the different layers of the atmosphere. And each booklet you can see as you write it there, if you fold it down, there's a place to make notes more about like space and the exosphere and the ionosphere and the stratosphere and the troposphere, which I don't really remember the difference between all those right now. But if I was doing a unit on the atmosphere, this would be something that my arts and crafts kids would really enjoy doing, is making this little chart. And then they're really fun to also take along to like a presentation fair if you're doing something like that, or putting in a little notebook or scrapbook that you're keeping for your kids for their graduation, if you are. Okay, that was a lot to take in. That was everything that I have to say about language arts, except for that TTRS program that I will add to my notes so that you can look that up as well. It is really good for teaching dyslexic kids to type and to spell and to read new words. So that is why I just wanted to throw it out there, because they do a good job of doing that. So, all right. Remember, week 19, we're going to be reading You Can Teach Your Child Successfully by Ruth Beechick. It is a classic, and I recommend you go ahead and find it. Order it if you can, or check it out of your library, and we'll study that on week 19. Thank you for listening to all that I had to say about language arts. It was a lot. Have a good week.